Hi there, I'm Jenny Lay-Flurrie. I'm the Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft, and I'm thrilled to join you today for CREST and to have a great conversation about the world of accessibility and the future of technology. My role here at Microsoft is to drive a culture of disability inclusion and accessibility across our 150,000 employees and all of our products, our partners, and work with our customers to help tackle the disability divide. So I'm going to give you a bit of nuggets of joy on what we're up to, what we're tackling, and some of the learning, particularly as it comes to deaf, hard of hearing world. I'm sitting outside today in Seattle. It's one of those rare, beautiful days of sunshine. So behind me, you'll see trees and greenery and occasionally a little bit of sun. I'm wearing one of our Microsoft shirts, which is Empower Every Person, a blue shirt. It's got little figures of individuals with varying disabilities. And I'm a white person, white female with brown hair and pink glasses. So let's get going. First, let's just cover off some basics before we begin. Disability. Big. If you look at the demographics on disability, they ground us, and they should ground us on everything that we do. The demographics on disability, in fact, the last global demographics were really collated in 2010, and we're anxiously awaiting the results of the 2020 census survey. But those demographics put this space at over 1 billion people around the world. Deafness, hard of hearing, clearly a huge component of that, including blindness, mobility, speech, neurodiversity, and mental health. Now, if you look at how things are changing from a demographic perspective, clearly this is a growing sector. Even before the pandemic, we knew that. Disability is very correlated with age, and we are an aging globe. But if you actually look deeper than that and you look at what's happened in the last year, we also know that so much of disability is non-apparent or not visible to the eye. In fact, some estimates put it even as up to 75% of disability being invisible. Now, if you look at that and look at what's happened in just the area of mental health in the last year alone, mental health rates, according to Mental Health America, have grown between, close to 700% and 900% increase in 2020. And that's just screenings of anxiety and depression. That's an enormous increase. And while I still think we've got a lot to learn, I think what is clear is that COVID has had a direct and indirect impact on our world in the same way as other diseases, other viruses have in history. What the pandemic has done is driven more people to our world. That's the direct impact of COVID. It's increased the number of people with disabilities, whether they received the virus and received conditions as a result, or long COVID, which we're yet to learn a lot about, candidly. We're still early in this game, but it's driving a lot more people to our world. The indirect impact is areas like mental health, which has removed covering being what so many of us do in the disability world, hiding our disability, worried that it may impact how others view or work with us. If you take a step back from that and we think about the world of deafness and hard of hearing, I'm a symptom of those trends. I have hearing loss. I am over 100 decibel loss in both ears. My speech is very deceptive, but I do not hear you. My deafness, part genetics. My sister and my dad both had moderate loss, and part disease, measles. I do think that I'm one of the millions, in fact, nearly 400 million people with deafness around the world. And if you just look at my own journey, I came to Microsoft 16 years ago. I came to work on a product called Hotmail. And you'll remember it was all about the butterfly for those that can go back to 2005 when Hotmail and Messenger and others were at its peak. I was attracted to Microsoft because I was one of the first people using video messenger. I used it to communicate with my family, and I fell in love with the medium. And I wanted to work on a product space that, well, had personal meaning to me. I joined the company thinking that everyone would video one another. Little did I realize that actually people do like to talk quite a lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls, and I was quickly out of my depth. I reached out to HR here at Microsoft, and I also reached out to the Huddle community. Huddle is the name of our deaf, hard of hearing community here at Microsoft. And for those that know the history of Gallaudet, you will know that that term actually came from Gallaudet. It came from a football, and I'm not an American football player. I want to be clear about that. I am British, and football means something very different for us. But in terms of American football, that huddle that is created was actually originated by Gallaudet. I love that every time that I shoot an email to the community to ask, well, who's the best deaf-friendly dentist? What's the latest technology? How are those hearing aids working out for you? Those kind of conversations go on every day. In fact, that's what got me into ultimately the job that I do today. I joined the deaf community. I then joined every other community that I could find at Microsoft and ended up with the help of many people to form the Disability Employee Resource Group. That resource group was 6 groups back in 2005, many of them originating back in the 90s, which is when disability and accessibility first got its wings here at Microsoft, with Bill Gates putting people against and to drive accessibility into some of our earliest versions of Windows. Spin forward to today, and the ERG has over 22 groups around the world, many of them in the non-apparent and invisible categories today. That matters. What it meant as chair of the ERG for me is that I got to immerse myself and learn and listen and watch the conversations happening across the entire spectrum of our company. I got to spend time with communities and really learn the diversity, that disability is simply a part of being human, and ultimately fell firmly, deeply into the world of accessibility. Accessibility is the digital physical means to provide access. It's as simple as a ramp into a building, power door openers, or as simple as making sure that your video has captions, that your website can be read by a screen reader, that your document has the right alternative text to ensure that blind and low vision can understand what's written on there. Accessibility is very simple at its core, but incredibly exciting as a technical discipline and crucially important for equality and access. If I've learned anything over the course of the last 16 years, well, there's quite a few things. My job now is to build a sustainable, durable ecosystem of accessibility at Microsoft. That starts with people. The most important thing that we can do as a company is make sure that our company reflects the diversity of our customers. That means that hiring talent with disabilities, hiring deaf talent, is crucially important to us. Supporting deaf talent, equally as important. On my team sits our incredible deaf, hard of hearing services team, our full-time interpreters, and we have central accommodations. So it means that anyone who joins Microsoft with deafness, with blindness, with any disability, they can ask us for what they need to be successful, whether that's an interpreter, captioning, braille device. And that is paid for centrally with the cost never seen by manager. There's no cap on that cost. So my everyday now, as my deafness has declined, while I still speak for myself, I leverage a full-time ASL interpreter, and I use captioning functionality in every product, like Microsoft Teams. Teams is my go-to. I have auto captioning, AI-provided captioning, which the accuracy, well, it's improved a lot, a huge amount from where it started over 25 years ago when I first saw the first prototype. It's now at the bar where it's recognizing names of individuals, it's recognizing complex multisyllable words, and the accuracy actually is on par with natural language. I can switch on a transcript and have both a transcript and captions on the page, along with my sign language interpreter, making sure that I don't miss a beat. I didn't grow up with sign language as my first language. I still depend on that beautiful jigsaw puzzle. But people and empowering people is crucial to create features like those. In fact, if you peel back where Teams captions came from and Teams transcript came from, it goes all the way back to Huddle. Our deaf community here at Microsoft is powerful. And it's their feedback that even today I was looking at threads and they're putting in a whole bunch of new requests and features that they want to see in the core of our products. That's why across the spectrum of disability, we have a huge focus on hiring talent. If you come to Microsoft, we ask you to let us know what you need to be successful. If you come to Microsoft and you're neurodiverse, we actually have a specialized hiring program because we found that the interview process can be problematic for neurodiverse candidates and doesn't allow them to show their skills and talents. We also have a supported employment program, hiring developmental disabled talent. It's that important to us because once you had people, you get to the next part, which is making sure that you are building great products that are designed and inclusive of human. There's a saying in the disability world, there's lots of sayings in our world, nothing about us without us is a very grounding one. When you have people with disabilities infusing their expertise into the design process, you will quite simply get better products. It's logical, it just makes common sense. If you have the insights from deaf, hard of hearing people, you will get captioning that is actually useful. It will be big enough to read. It will have the right accuracy bar, because our dependence on it is not just putting it in a hairdresser's so you can have the sound off. Our dependence is it for every single word uttered. If you look at the world of sign language, this is one where I think there is so much still to learn. And in many ways, that's why I'm so excited to be here today. Because it's an area where nothing about us without us is incredibly important. If we take a step back for a minute and just talk about sign. 137 plus sign languages around the world. And sign language recognition is not the same as gesture recognition. There have been many, many, many technologies created that understand sign language or are supposed to meant to recognize sign language, but really what they're recognizing is gestures. And while there is technical goodness in every single one, many of the glove prototypes, that's the focus. It's looking at the simplicity of finger spelling of certain words, but what it's not looking at is it as a language, as sentences and structure and grammar. Many of these projects hit my desk and I look at every single one because ultimately every single one will move this industry forward. And I think it's such an important space for us all to be wallowing in, given that, well, natural language recognition has advanced incredibly in the last 5 years. And voice recognition, many products are moving to that as a means to access. If we don't invest in the same bar of comprehension of sign language, then the ability for deaf individuals to be able to access those products may become minimized over time. And from a technical perspective, it's viable. And what I mean by that is that the fidelity of quality of audio and video combined with artificial intelligence and machine learning makes simultaneous comprehension of language feasible and possible. That doesn't mean it will be easy. It's one of the most complex, algorithmic, mathematical exercises grounded in linguistics, grounded in a lot of technical constructs. But technically, it's viable. But what needs to happen is that people who are experts in language, users of sign language, need to be core and instrumental to the development of that. Inclusion of people who are deaf into ensuring that we technically ground the future of sign language recognition is incredibly important. We've taken some steps, but there's far more needed. The steps that we have taken so far is coalescing just an incredible army of experts. Back in 2019, we actually collated a workshop, 18 experts from across all the various areas of sign language recognition and translation topics. Deaf culture, computer vision, natural language processing, avatar generation, lots of discussion on lots of different areas. A formal paper was posted. It actually won the winning paper at Assets the following year. And it's something that I would encourage you all to read. What it highlighted is some of the obvious things. Sign language recognition is not gesture recognition. That with 137 languages, sign languages around the world and growing, and each linguistic difference in each area of sign language, it is incredibly important for us holistically to be investing in this in the right way to ensure that there is equality, access, and parity for deaf individuals going forward as a lot of technologies move to voice recognition. But in order to do that, it needs a different approach. Technically, this is now viable when you look at the application and advancements that have been made with artificial intelligence, with video and image recognition, and also looking at what is possible with machine learning. Mathematically, algorithmically, the nuances of a language as complex as sign language, which is not about what's just on the hands, is possible. But it will need that coalition of industry experts working together in a concentrated way to build the right approach. In the absence of that, then you will see a lot of, more technologies coming out that will have limited use for deaf and hard of hearing. Some of you will know many of those. The gloves, one great example, which understand gestures such as finger spelling. Now, each one of these has incredible value technically and advances the industry in a small way, some big, some small, and it moves us forward. But in terms of there being pragmatic application for deaf, hard of hearing individuals, not so much, not yet. And in fact, some of the wild claims that are made on some of the articles and videos that support this are misleading. One, there is no need to cure or solve communication for the deaf. The deaf communicate just fine. It's the non-deaf that don't. And two, these don't understand language. They understand gestures. One of the amazing things about this gang coming together back in 2019 and the continuing conversations since It's the narrowing in of that focus. And I do think that programs like AI for Accessibility and many others will help to move this area forward over time. But there's still a little ways to go. I think over time you'll start to see sentences come and formations come together with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 different sign language that understand not 100, 200 or 300 words, but understands the grammar, the linguistics to be able to pull those together into language, sentences and paragraphs. That could enable products to start making sure that as they're enabling voice recognitions as a means to input or output access, sign language recognition could also be possible. If we look at the theory of how to do this, that's where I think we do know and we do have a solid future. We've seen by bringing experts together what can be accomplished. One of those, just not to do with sign language recognition, but to do with accessibility and in opening doors where they've been closed previously, was with our gaming world, Xbox. Xbox is doing an incredible amount to empower every person, and where they see a closed door where a gamer with a disability may not be able to game, they are opening it. Now, some of those things are very simple. Inclusion of captioning into the core of Xbox, into a lot of the games, and you're seeing that coming through if you're at all into some of the cool Xbox stuff. But also taking those kind of scenarios where it needs a more complex solution, like mobility. What Xbox team did was look at the scenario of the Xbox controller. The Xbox controller is a simple handheld device where you need opposable thumbs in order to play the games. In fact, you need your index fingers and your thumbs. I'm learning. I have teenagers. That doesn't work for everyone. If you don't have opposable thumbs and that level of dexterity, how do you play? Well, what they did was coalesce experts. In fact, the experts came in the form of multiple gamers with disabilities, often veterans, with play being a form of respite, therapy, escape, joy, and took their insights from rigs that they had built and started to figure out how they could get that to work in conjunction with the Xbox. What it manifested over time and a lot of 3D printing over about a couple of years was the Xbox Adaptive Controller. The Xbox Adaptive Controller is a scalable solution with 2 black switches on it and multiple inputs. So no matter what and how you play, whether you have a hand, you don't have a hand, you use your neck, you use your knees, you're using one arm, one finger, it will allow you to play and adapt the device to your needs. That Xbox Adaptive Controller has been well received by the people who want and use it, gamers with disabilities. And I think it's a textbook example of the importance of inclusive design and the importance of making sure that all voices are represented in that design process. If that whole process had been done in a way that hadn't included voices from the community, the end result would not have given something that is so talked about, so widely used as it is today. We've also seen how that process of inclusive design is important even in some of our simplest products. Making sure that our documents can be accessible. In fact, we have something called Accessibility Checker in Office. Accessibility Checker used to be in a Gringotts vault deep in the heart of Office. And yet it's a really important functionality because it checks the accessibility of your documents. So we moved it next to spell check. And last month we turned it on by default. So as you're writing a Word document, PowerPoint, anything Office, it will be checking your document to make sure that it's inclusive and prompting you. In fact, if you try and send a large email, Outlook will nudge you if something isn't accessible before you're able to hit send. It's simple steps like this and making sure that you're infusing accessibility right into the core of everything that you do that will make sure that we build a more inclusive world. So people, products, research and innovation using the premise of inclusive design is how I think we will tackle one of the biggest problems of our time, the disability divide. We know by looking at the societal inclusion-exclusion rates that exist for disability, especially deafness, that there is a divide. You look at the employment, underemployment, labour participation rate, and there is an incredible, massive difference. That divide has to shift. And our new strategy, our new goal is to tackle that disability divide. We're doing that by advancing technology, doing that collaboratively with the community, with our employees, with partners, to make sure that we're giving equal access and opportunity and empowering people with tools that just make it easier to be inclusive and empower everyone to live up to whatever they want to do to be successful. We're also focused on the talent pipeline, on opening doors to talent, particularly those in education and employment. And sometimes the simplest things here matter. Making sure that captioning is on every single part of our digital learning experiences. Making sure that we have dedicated accessibility training, that we add audio descriptions, and also partnering with universities to grow the bar of accessibility. By growing the use and awareness of accessibility at university level and the self-advocacy needed that so many of you get from just being and existing at Gallaudet. We believe that that will change the pipeline as it comes to employment, and we tackle the same issues there. And the third is really tackling our own culture. We want to be lifting that pipeline into Microsoft to empower talent to be able to come in, bring their expertise and insights, and help us to deliver better, more accessible, more inclusive stuff. Products, services, websites, marketing campaigns, whatever it may be. And in order to open those doors, we have a keen focus on understanding our own representation. We know that 6.1% of Microsoft US employees today have disabilities. That number was from September 2020, and I know since that number has grown. We want that number to reflect the density of disability as it exists in the world, and it will continue to grow. By tackling the disability divide, my hope for the future is that in any room that I walk in, I feel empowered. I'm not worried about accommodations, interpreters, or access. That technology helps me to be independent, helps my family to be independent, and that it empowers every person with a disability to, go kick ass in the world. I do believe that that is possible. It's possible with cooperation, collaboration, partnership, and advancing and opening those doors. So have an incredible conference. Please invest your time. Please go wild with your ideas. And check out all of the resources and papers that we have on sign language, that we have on deaf and hard of hearing features, And feel free to nudge me if you have any great thoughts on what we could do next. Take care. Bye.